Why do some women feel irresistibly drawn to men who treat them as if they were invisible? Why does that guy who barely responds to messages, who is cold and distant, awaken overwhelming passion, while the kind and caring man is seen merely as a friend? Carl Jung, the revolutionary Swiss psychoanalyst, unraveled this mystery decades ago. He discovered that there exists a deep and disturbing psychological pattern behind this attraction that seems to go against all logic. It's not about masochism or low self-esteem. It's something far more complex and ancestral. Jung identified unconscious forces that operate like invisible magnets, creating an addictive dynamic that keeps millions of women trapped in destructive cycles. These shocking discoveries reveal uncomfortable truths about human nature that society prefers to ignore. Prepare yourself for a disturbing journey through the dark side of female attraction. What you'll discover may completely change your perspective on relationships and about yourself. 1. The masculine shadow that hypnotizes. Deep within every man exists a hidden force that most women never see coming. Jung called this the shadow, the dark, repressed parts of personality that society teaches men to hide. But here's the twist that changes everything. This very darkness becomes magnetic to the female psyche in ways that defy all rational thought. When a man embraces his shadow, he radiates an energy that feels dangerous yet intoxicating. He doesn't apologize for taking up space. He doesn't seek approval or validation from others. His confidence borders on arrogance, and his indifference feels like a challenge that awakens something primal in women. This isn't about being cruel or mean. It's about operating from a place of complete self-possession that most men never achieve. The shadow man doesn't chase. He doesn't text back immediately. He doesn't rearrange his life to accommodate others. This behavior triggers an ancient survival mechanism in women that mistakes emotional unavailability for strength and power. The female brain interprets his detachment as evidence that he must be valuable. After all, only a high-value man could afford to be so selective with his attention. This dynamic creates a psychological trap that feels impossible to escape. The more he pulls away, the more she wants to prove her worth. The less he gives, the more precious his attention becomes. It's like chasing a mirage in the desert, always just out of reach, always promising satisfaction that never comes. Jung understood that this attraction isn't conscious or logical. It operates at the level of instinct, bypassing the thinking mind entirely. Women find themselves drawn to these men despite knowing better, despite friends warning them, despite their own past experiences proving that this path leads to pain. The shadow man activates something deeper than reason. He touches the part of the psyche that craves mystery, challenge, and the thrill of the unknown. The tragedy is that this magnetic quality often masks deep emotional wounds and unresolved trauma. The man who seems so confident and untouchable is frequently running from his own pain, using detachment as armor against vulnerability. But women rarely see this truth. They see only the surface, the mysterious allure of someone who seems to need nothing and no one. This creates a perfect storm of mutual unconsciousness. She's attracted to his apparent strength while he's terrified of the intimacy she represents. Neither understands the deeper forces at play. She mistakes his emotional unavailability for masculine power, while he mistakes her pursuit for weakness rather than recognizing her own wounded need for validation. The shadow's hypnotic power lies in its promise of transformation. Women unconsciously believe that if they can crack this man's code, if they can be the one to break through his walls, they will have achieved something extraordinary. They will have proven their worth in the most challenging arena possible. This belief keeps them hooked long past the point where logic would tell them to walk away. Understanding this pattern is the first step toward breaking free from its grip. The shadow man's power over you isn't real. It's an illusion created by your own unconscious programming. Once you see the mechanism clearly, you can begin to choose differently. 2. The absent father complex. The relationship between a girl and her father creates the blueprint for every romantic relationship she will have for the rest of her life. When that foundation is cracked or missing entirely, it creates a wound that seems to heal but never truly does. This wound becomes a magnet for men who will recreate the same pattern of emotional unavailability that felt so familiar in childhood. Jung discovered that daughters of absent fathers develop what he called a father complex, an unconscious pattern where they repeatedly seek out relationships that mirror their earliest experience of masculine love. If daddy was physically absent, emotionally distant, critical, or inconsistent, she learns that this is what love looks like. Her nervous system becomes wired to recognize emotional unavailability as home. The absent father creates a unique form of psychological hunger that can never be satisfied in adult relationships. It's the hunger of a child who never received the unconditional love and protection that every daughter deserves from her father. This hunger doesn't disappear when she grows up. It goes underground and drives her choices in ways she doesn't consciously understand. When she encounters a man who is emotionally unavailable, alarms should go off. But instead, something deeper happens. Her unconscious mind recognizes the familiar pattern and whispers, "This is your chance to finally get it right." She believes that if she can make this unavailable man choose her, love her, commit to her, she will finally heal that original wound. She will prove that she was worthy of daddy's love all along. This creates a compulsive need to chase men who withhold their affection. The unavailable man becomes a stand-in for the father who never gave her what she needed. Every text he doesn't return, every date he cancels, every moment of coldness becomes an opportunity to try again. She develops an addiction to the possibility of finally being chosen by someone who seems incapable of choosing anyone. The psychological mechanics are brutal in their efficiency. Her nervous system learned early that love comes with conditions, that affection must be earned, that male attention is scarce and precious. When she meets an available, caring man who offers consistent love, her unconscious mind rejects it as too easy or not real love. Real love, according to her wounded programming, requires struggle, proof, and endless effort to maintain. The father wound also creates a distorted relationship with masculine energy itself. She may simultaneously crave male approval while feeling anger and resentment toward men. This internal conflict keeps her stuck in relationships where she can never fully trust or surrender, because part of her is always waiting for the inevitable abandonment. What makes this pattern so persistent is that it operates below the level of conscious awareness. She doesn't wake up thinking, "I'm going to choose another emotionally unavailable man today." Instead, she finds herself mysteriously drawn to men who seem strong, independent, and slightly out of reach. Her attraction feels natural and right, even though it consistently leads to the same painful outcomes. The absent father complex also affects how she views her own worth. If the first man who was supposed to love her unconditionally couldn't or wouldn't do so, she develops a core belief that she is somehow unlovable or defective. This belief creates a desperate need to prove otherwise, and unavailable men become the perfect testing ground for this impossible mission. Breaking free from this complex requires recognizing that the wound belongs to the past, not the present. The little girl who needed daddy's love deserves compassion, but she cannot be healed through romantic relationships with emotionally unavailable men. That healing must come from within, through conscious choice and the courage to choose differently. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The deadly dance of pursuer and runner. There's a dance that happens between men and women that feels like love, but destroys everything it touches. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly in his patients. A psychological chase where one person runs while the other pursues, creating a cycle that feeds on itself and grows stronger with each turn. This isn't romance, it's addiction disguised as passion. The dance begins innocently enough. She shows interest, and he responds with just enough attention to keep her engaged, but never enough to satisfy her completely. When she steps closer, he steps back. When she pulls away, suddenly he becomes interested again. This creates a rhythm that bypasses all logical thinking and goes straight to the most primitive parts of the brain where survival instincts live. The woman becomes the pursuer, not because she enjoys the chase, but because her nervous system interprets his distance as a threat to her survival. Every time he pulls away, ancient alarm bells ring in her subconscious. She must win him back, not for love, but because losing him feels like death itself. This isn't drama or exaggeration. It's how her body and mind experience the rejection. What makes this dance so deadly is that it creates artificial intensity. The constant uncertainty floods her system with stress hormones that feel exactly like passion. Her heart races when she sees his name on her phone. Her stomach drops when he doesn't respond. These physical sensations convince her that what she's feeling must be true love, when actually she's experiencing the symptoms of emotional trauma. The man in this dance often has no idea what he's creating. He's not consciously trying to manipulate or control. Instead, he's responding to his own unconscious programming that tells him to run from intimacy. When she gets too close, his own survival mechanisms kick in, and he creates distance to feel safe again. Neither person understands they're trapped in a cycle that serves no one. The pursuer becomes addicted to the brief moments when the runner turns around and gives attention. These moments feel like the most incredible highs because they come after such painful lows. It's the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The random, unpredictable rewards create stronger attachment than consistent, reliable ones. She starts organizing her entire life around these brief moments of connection. Jung recognized that this dance recreates early childhood dynamics where love was conditional and unpredictable. The child who had to perform for attention, who never knew when affection would be withdrawn, grows up seeking relationships that feel familiar. The uncertainty doesn't feel wrong, it feels like home. Stable, consistent love feels boring or fake because it doesn't match the internal template of what love is supposed to feel like. The deadly part of this dance is that it prevents real intimacy from ever developing. True connection requires safety, vulnerability, and trust. But the pursuer-runner dynamic creates the opposite: fear, guardedness, and constant anxiety. Both people remain strangers to each other, playing roles instead of being authentic. She becomes the desperate pursuer, he becomes the distant prize, and neither gets to be themselves. The psychological damage accumulates over time. The pursuer loses her sense of self as she becomes obsessed with winning the runner's approval. She stops paying attention to her own needs, her own goals, her own happiness. Everything becomes about him, his moods, his schedule, his attention. She disappears into the chase and forgets who she was before it began. The runner, meanwhile, becomes addicted to the power and control. Even if he doesn't consciously realize it, he enjoys being desired and pursued. It feeds his ego and makes him feel valuable. But this dynamic also prevents him from developing real emotional intimacy skills. He learns to use distance as a tool for control rather than learning how to connect authentically with another person. Breaking free from this dance requires recognizing it for what it is, not love, but trauma bonding. Real love doesn't require chasing or running. It doesn't create anxiety and obsession. It doesn't make you lose yourself in someone else's approval. When you find yourself in the pursuer role, the healthiest thing you can do is stop dancing altogether. Step out of the pattern and see what happens when you're not chasing anymore. The dance only works when both people participate. When the pursuer stops pursuing, the dynamic collapses. Sometimes the runner will chase for a while, confused by the sudden change in pattern. But more often, he'll simply find someone else to dance with, revealing that it was never about love at all. It was about the dynamic itself. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it helps you recognize the difference between real attraction and trauma response. If your feelings for someone are strongest when they're pulling away, if you feel most passionate when you're fighting for their attention, if the relationship feels like an emotional roller coaster, you're not in love. You're dancing a deadly dance that will consume you if you don't have the courage to stop moving to its rhythm. 4. The wounded animus and its thirst for validation. Inside every woman lives what Jung called the animus, her inner masculine energy that shapes how she relates to men and understands her own power in the world. When this inner masculine is wounded, it creates a desperate hunger for external validation from men that can never be satisfied, no matter how much attention she receives. This wound turns relationships into battlegrounds, where she fights for her worth instead of sharing genuine love. The animus forms during childhood through interactions with father figures, brothers, male teachers, and society's messages about what it means to be valuable as a woman. When these early experiences are positive, a woman develops a healthy inner masculine that supports her confidence and helps her attract balanced relationships. But when trauma, neglect, or negative messaging damages this inner energy, it creates a void that feels bottomless. A wounded animus whispers constant lies about her worth. It tells her she's only valuable when men desire her. It convinces her that male attention is the ultimate measure of her success as a woman. It creates an internal critic that judges her harshly whenever she's single or not receiving enough validation from men. This inner voice becomes louder than her own intuition, drowning out her ability to know what she actually wants and needs. When this wound is active, she becomes addicted to the feeling of being chosen by men who seem powerful or valuable. But here's the trap. The men who seem most powerful are often the ones least capable of providing real validation. They're usually dealing with their own wounds and insecurities, using emotional unavailability as a shield against their own pain. So she finds herself chasing validation from people who have none to give. The wounded animus creates a distorted relationship with masculine energy, where she simultaneously craves and fears male power. She wants to be chosen by strong men, but she also resents needing their approval to feel good about herself. This internal conflict keeps her stuck in relationships where she can never fully relax or trust, because part of her is always performing for acceptance, while another part rebels against having to perform at all. This wound also affects how she shows up in relationships. Instead of being authentic and vulnerable, she becomes strategic. She learns to present herself in ways that maximize male attention rather than expressing who she really is. She may dress certain ways, act less intelligent than she is, hide her opinions, or pretend to be more sexually available than feels comfortable. The wounded animus convinces her that her true self isn't enough to keep a man interested. The thirst for validation becomes compulsive because it's trying to fill a wound that belongs to the past. No amount of present-day male attention can heal the damage done to her sense of worth in childhood. But the wounded animus doesn't understand this. It keeps seeking external proof of value, believing that the right man's love will finally make her feel complete. This creates endless cycles of seeking, finding, losing, and seeking again. Jung understood that healing the animus wound requires developing a relationship with her own inner masculine energy. This means learning to validate herself, to trust her own judgment, to feel powerful and complete without needing a man's approval. It means developing the inner father she never had, the voice that tells her she's worthy simply because she exists, not because of what she does or how she looks or who wants her. The wounded animus also creates confusion about what healthy masculine energy actually looks like. She may be drawn to men who seem confident but are actually narcissistic, mistaking arrogance for strength. She might interpret emotional unavailability as mystery and depth when it's actually just fear of intimacy. The wound distorts her perception, making unhealthy dynamics feel exciting and healthy ones feel boring. Recognizing this pattern requires honest self-examination. Notice when you feel most attracted to men. Is it when they're showing genuine interest and availability, or when they're withholding attention and making you work for their approval? Pay attention to how you feel about yourself when you're single versus when you're being pursued. If your self-worth fluctuates dramatically based on male attention, your animus needs healing. The journey to heal this wound involves developing your own inner sense of masculine power. This doesn't mean becoming masculine, but rather integrating the healthy masculine qualities of direction, boundaries, self-protection, and inner authority. When your animus is healed, you stop seeking validation from men because you're already receiving it from within. You become magnetically attractive to healthy men because you're no longer desperately seeking their approval. A healed animus chooses relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need. It recognizes that real love enhances an already complete life rather than filling an empty void. This shift changes everything about how you attract and relate to men, drawing in partners who can match your own level of self-possession and emotional maturity. 5. The illusion of the project man. There's a special kind of man who becomes irresistible to certain women, not because of who he is, but because of who she believes he could become. Jung identified this as one of the most dangerous romantic illusions, the belief that love can transform someone who doesn't want to be transformed. This illusion turns women into unpaid therapists, life coaches, and emotional rehabilitation centers for men who never asked for help. The project man appears in many forms. He might be the brilliant artist who just needs someone to believe in him, the successful businessman who's emotionally shut down from past hurt, the charming rebel who simply needs the right woman to settle him down, the wounded soul who would be perfect if he could just heal from his trauma. Each version promises the same thing, that with enough love, patience, and understanding, he will transform into the man of her dreams. This illusion feels noble and romantic. She tells herself she's not shallow like other women who only want finished products. She sees potential where others see problems. She believes in love's power to heal and transform. This narrative makes her feel special, chosen, and morally superior. She becomes convinced that her unique love is exactly what he needs to become whole. But here's what Jung understood that most women miss. People only change when they genuinely want to change, and they do the work themselves. No amount of external love, support, or encouragement can force internal transformation. When someone isn't ready to grow, your efforts to help them will only create resistance and resentment. You become an unwanted mother figure instead of a desired partner. The project man dynamic creates a fundamentally unequal relationship from the start. She positions herself as the giver, helper, and healer, while he becomes the receiver, patient, and project. This imbalance feels meaningful to her because it makes her feel needed and important. But it also means the relationship is built on his inadequacy rather than his wholeness. For the relationship to work, he must remain broken enough to need her help. This creates a psychological trap that serves neither person. She becomes addicted to the feeling of being needed and the fantasy of transformation. He becomes dependent on her emotional labor while resenting the pressure to change. Neither person gets to experience the joy of being loved for who they actually are right now. Instead, they're locked in a dynamic where love is conditional on improvement that may never come. The illusion persists because project men often show just enough progress to keep hope alive. They'll make small changes, have breakthrough moments, or promise to do better. These glimpses of potential feel like proof that the strategy is working, that more time and effort will eventually pay off. But sustainable change requires internal motivation that can't be provided by someone else, no matter how much they love you. Women fall into this pattern for several psychological reasons. Some learned early that love means fixing people who are broken. Others discovered that being needed felt safer than being wanted because need seems more permanent than desire. Many believe that suffering for love proves its authenticity, that easy love isn't real love. These beliefs create a magnetic attraction to men who require significant emotional investment. The project man also appeals to women who struggle with their own worth. If she doesn't believe she deserves someone who's already whole and functional, she might feel more comfortable with someone who needs her help. His brokenness makes him seem more attainable and less likely to leave her for someone better. The dynamic feels safer, even though it's actually more damaging to her self-esteem over time. Jung recognized that this pattern prevents both people from developing authentic intimacy. Real love requires seeing and accepting someone as they are, not as they could become. When you're focused on changing someone, you're not really present with them. You're relating to your fantasy of their potential rather than their current reality. This makes genuine connection impossible. The tragedy is that women often sacrifice years of their lives trying to transform men who aren't interested in changing. They give their best energy, attention, and emotional resources to relationships that can never fulfill them because they're based on false premises. Meanwhile, they miss opportunities with men who are already emotionally available and ready for real partnership. Breaking free from the project man illusion requires accepting that you cannot save anyone who doesn't want to save themselves. Your love, no matter how pure or powerful, cannot heal someone else's wounds or force their growth. When you find yourself attracted to someone's potential rather than their reality, step back and ask yourself why you're avoiding men who are already whole. The most loving thing you can do for both yourself and him is to relate to who he is right now, not who he might become. If that person isn't someone you can be happy with today, then this isn't the right relationship for you. Real love doesn't require a construction project. It requires two whole people choosing to share their lives together. 6. The addiction to the adrenaline of suffering. The human nervous system can become addicted to its own stress hormones in ways that feel like love, but are actually trauma responses. Jung observed that some women develop an unconscious addiction to the biochemical cocktail that comes with emotional pain, creating a pattern where they mistake suffering for passion and chaos for connection. This addiction is so powerful that peaceful, stable relationships feel boring or wrong. When you're in a relationship that constantly triggers your fight or flight response, your body produces a flood of stress chemicals, including adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. These chemicals create intense physical sensations: racing heart, butterflies in stomach, heightened awareness, emotional highs and lows. Over time, your system becomes dependent on these chemicals to feel alive and engaged. This biochemical addiction explains why some women feel most attracted to men during moments of conflict, uncertainty, or emotional drama. The stress response feels like passion because both involve intense physical arousal. Your body can't tell the difference between excitement and anxiety, between love and fear. They create similar sensations, so your mind interprets the stress of dysfunction as proof of deep connection. The addiction cycle works like any other dependency. You need increasingly intense drama to achieve the same emotional high. A man who's simply emotionally unavailable might not provide enough stimulation after a while. You might find yourself unconsciously creating conflict or seeking partners who bring more chaos into your life. The periods of calm between dramatic episodes feel empty and meaningless rather than peaceful and secure. Jung understood that this pattern often develops in childhood when love and trauma become entangled. If your early relationships involved unpredictable caregivers, emotional volatility, or dangerous situations, your nervous system learned to associate intensity with connection. Safety and stability feel foreign and wrong because they don't match your internal template of what love looks like. The addiction also serves as protection against deeper intimacy. When you're constantly dealing with drama and crisis, you never have to face the vulnerability of real emotional connection. The chaos keeps you focused on survival rather than authentic relating. It's easier to fight about his behavior than to share your deeper fears and desires. The addiction becomes a shield against the scariness of genuine closeness. Women caught in this pattern often describe feeling most alive during the worst moments of their relationships. The middle-of-the-night fights, the tearful confrontations, the dramatic breakups and makeups, these moments feel more real and meaningful than quiet evenings spent in peaceful companionship. The addiction convinces them that intensity equals authenticity, that struggle proves love. This creates a distorted relationship with healthy men who don't trigger constant stress responses. A man who's consistent, reliable, and emotionally available doesn't flood your system with stress chemicals. Without that familiar biochemical rush, the connection feels flat or boring. Your addicted nervous system interprets the absence of drama as the absence of love. The physical withdrawal from drama addiction can feel devastating. When you try to choose healthier relationships, your body goes through actual withdrawal symptoms: depression, anxiety, restlessness, and feeling emotionally numb. This makes it extremely difficult to stay committed to healthy choices because your entire system is screaming that something is wrong, that you need to return to the familiar intensity of dysfunction. Breaking free from this addiction requires understanding that what you're experiencing isn't love, it's biochemical dependency. Real love creates a sense of safety and peace in your nervous system, not constant activation and stress. Healthy passion comes from genuine attraction and compatibility, not from fear and uncertainty about your partner's feelings or commitment. The healing process involves gradually retraining your nervous system to find calm states rewarding rather than threatening. This means learning to tolerate the discomfort of stability without creating drama to generate familiar intensity. It means recognizing that boredom in early stages of healthy relationships is actually your system adjusting to safety, not a sign that the connection lacks substance. You'll know you're healing from this addiction when you start feeling genuinely attracted to men who make you feel peaceful rather than anxious. When consistency feels comforting rather than boring. When you can enjoy quiet moments together without needing conflict or drama to feel connected. When your nervous system finally learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real, the journey requires patience with yourself as you detox from the chemicals your body has become dependent on. It means choosing partners based on how they make you feel in calm moments, not just in intense ones. Most importantly, it means developing the capacity to create genuine excitement and passion in your life through healthy channels rather than through relationship chaos. 7. The primal wound of abandonment. Deep in the core of every human being lives the most fundamental fear that drives almost every destructive relationship pattern: the terror of being left alone. Jung discovered that this primal wound of abandonment creates such powerful unconscious programming that women will choose relationships guaranteed to hurt them rather than risk being alone. This wound doesn't just influence who they choose, it completely reshapes their entire approach to love into a desperate strategy for survival. The abandonment wound forms early, sometimes before conscious memory even begins. It might come from a parent who left, died, or was emotionally absent. It could develop from inconsistent caregiving, where love was available one day and withdrawn the next. Sometimes it forms from more subtle experiences, being the family scapegoat, feeling invisible among siblings, or sensing that parental love came with impossible conditions that could never be permanently satisfied. What makes this wound so devastating is that it creates a core belief that love is temporary and conditional. The wounded part of her psyche becomes convinced that everyone will eventually leave, so relationships become desperate attempts to prevent the inevitable abandonment. She doesn't enter partnerships to share joy and growth. She enters them to ward off the existential terror of being alone with herself. This fear drives her toward men who are already emotionally unavailable because, paradoxically, they feel safer than available men. If he's already distant, she can't be disappointed when he doesn't fully commit. If he's already withholding love, she doesn't have to fear losing something she never really had. The unavailable man protects her from experiencing the full devastation of abandonment because he never truly arrives in the first place. The wound creates a self-fulfilling prophecy that seems to prove her worst fears true. Her desperate energy and constant need for reassurance eventually push away even men who initially wanted to stay. Her hypervigilance for signs of abandonment makes her interpret normal relationship fluctuations as evidence that he's already 1 foot out the door. She becomes so focused on preventing abandonment that she creates the very dynamic she's trying to avoid. Jung understood that this wound operates at the level of survival instinct, not rational thought. When triggered, her nervous system responds as if abandonment means death, because for a helpless child, being alone really could mean death. This ancient programming doesn't update automatically as she grows into an adult who can actually take care of herself. The wounded child inside remains convinced that being alone equals annihilation. The abandonment wound also distorts her relationship with her own worth. She develops the belief that if she were truly valuable and lovable, people wouldn't leave her. Every departure becomes evidence of her fundamental defectiveness. This creates a desperate need to prove her worth by making herself indispensable to partners who don't actually want to be tied down. She becomes whatever she thinks they want, losing herself in the process. This wound makes her tolerance for mistreatment shockingly high. She'll accept crumbs of attention, inconsistent behavior, and even emotional abuse, rather than face the possibility of being alone. The fear of abandonment becomes stronger than her need for respect, kindness, or genuine love. She trains herself to be grateful for whatever scraps of connection she can get, no matter how inadequate or damaging. The primal nature of this wound means it affects every area of her life, not just romantic relationships. She might stay in jobs that undervalue her, friendships that drain her, or living situations that don't serve her because change feels like abandonment. The wound creates a generalized fear of endings that keeps her stuck in situations that have long outlived their purpose. Healing this wound requires developing a secure relationship with herself that can't be threatened by other people's choices. This means learning that she can survive and even thrive alone, that solitude doesn't equal abandonment, that her worth doesn't depend on anyone else staying in her life. The healing involves grieving the original abandonment that created the wound, while building new neural pathways that associate being alone with safety rather than danger. The most challenging part of healing is learning to tolerate the anxiety that comes when healthy partners need space or independence. Her wounded system will interpret any need for autonomy as the beginning of abandonment. Healing means staying present with these feelings without acting on them, learning to self-soothe instead of seeking reassurance, and gradually building evidence that love can coexist with freedom. Recovery also involves learning to recognize the difference between someone who's temporarily busy or stressed and someone who's actually withdrawing their love. The abandonment wound makes everything feel like rejection, but healing teaches discernment between normal relationship rhythms and genuine disconnection. This allows her to respond appropriately rather than panicking at every sign of distance. The ultimate healing comes when she realizes that the right person won't trigger constant abandonment fears, because they'll consistently show up in ways that create safety rather than anxiety. She'll stop being attracted to people who make her question their commitment, because her nervous system will have learned to prefer the peace of secure attachment over the familiar intensity of abandonment terror.